Welcome back, everybody. We are now working on Unit 3, and this is where we start moving into learning about the primary styling language that we use inside of web pages, which is called CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and basically it's a separate language, right? So it's not HTML. It's got its own unique syntax that is designed to work in tandem with HTML and allow you to control basically the appearance and in some cases the behavior of content on your website. And CSS is actually really, really powerful. Can do some pretty amazing things these days. Here are the topics for the chapter. I am going to circle back to this website here in just a little bit, but these are the things that we're going to be learning. We are learning basic CSS here, so we're not like worried like super much about like graphics yet, like images and stuff like that. Nor are we worried about like creating really fancy, let's say like backgrounds, for example. We will mostly look at typography and setting basic color choices, and then understanding how we, set up, font sizes and other kind of things like that. So it's more typography focused than it is other. We will also learn a lot of really important terminology and technological aspects of this, which can feel a little bit overwhelming, frankly, but it is stuff you kind of need to know if you want to be successful in this field. So I will attempt to cover it in depth as is appropriate. There are videos already pre-recorded for this stuff, and the PowerPoint is available here. I'm going to go ahead and just download it and launch it locally rather than run it through the browser. But I am going to use this basically to guide the video and the lecture here this evening. So first things first, let's look at the learning outcomes. These are basically the things that we're going to do in this chapter. Come straight from the text. Second page of that. All right. And then we are going to learn about what CSS does. I mean, in essence, this concept of a style sheet has actually been around a really long time. When we used to do, or in some cases still do, actual physical printing, there was this period of time where they moved away from kind of like handset type and lithograph wheels and stuff like that, and started using electronic prepress. And they would have text, but in order to like make a heading or a caption or something italic or something weird like that, they would use what they called style sheets and tags, to basically control the content, very similar to what HTML does. And then that kind of built into working with word processors. So if you work with like Microsoft Word, for example, and I'll just like fire it up really quick to show you and create a blank document here. I'll pull it over from the other screen. But one thing that you'll notice when you're working inside of Word is they have this style section. So if I like type in some stuff and I highlight it and I want to make it a heading, whoa, that's kind of like HTML, folks, right? And what's really happening is it's designating it as a heading, but it's also changing the font color, the size, the spacing, and these are style sheets and they're in word processors, right? So the concept is not new. We're just borrowing it from the document world, basically in the print world, the concept, right? All right, so that's just a very primitive overview, so not diving deep into that. To really see kind of like the power of what CSS really brings to the table, there's this really neat website, and it's been around since basically CSS was kind of developed as a thing. And the important thing I do want to say also about CSS, like HTML, it's gone through a few different version numbers. So it started out with the original version, worked pretty well. It gave us a lot of power that we didn't have before. And then they moved it up to version 2, made it even more powerful. And then when HTML5 came out, they also came out with CSS 3. And I don't know if we're on version 3.3 or 3 point whatever now, I forget. but it added some super extra cool features that almost make CSS as powerful as using a scripting language. So like we can do like animations and stuff with CSS. It's crazy, actually, the stuff we can do. So this website was actually built as kind of like I don't even know what the right word is, like a sample trial of like what CSS is capable of. The author of the site basically did this. He offered up an HTML file, and you see I'm downloading it right now. And I'm just going to go ahead and open up that file, and notice this is what the file looks like. This is a plain HTML file, and it's got like some images and stuff in here. But what you may not notice is that is the same exact content as we're seeing on this page here. It's just in a different format. So I can actually right click view source on this and look at this. And there are some images and stuff on here, but images can be added directly to the content of a page. But notice all the stuff that we've learned, right? So as we look at this, doc type, HTML tags, the header, a bunch of meta tags in there, whatever, there's a title tag, right? And then it is pointing to a style sheet. But if I were to remove that style sheet, even the simple stuff that's happening in that document now would all kind of fall apart and look way different. It would look as ugly as the stuff that we've built so far. It's just plain Jane HTML, right? It's the style sheet that gives it the magic. To prove it, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to copy all this stuff. I'm going to bring it over to Visual Studio Code. And just for a moment, I'm going to go ahead and create a new file in here. We'll call it, index dot, well, no, we won't. We'll call it sample.html. I don't want to overwrite my other file. And then I'm going to paste. Oh, yeah, that didn't work too well, did it? Okay, so let's try that again. Copy, come in here, paste, right? So there's all that code. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll all the way to the top, and I'm going to remove the style sheet here. And in fact, I'm going to remove a bunch of the stuff. Okay, those two, I'm going to get rid of those. So I'm saving it. And now I'm going to go to that same folder where I was like doing my homework, right? This is not a good idea, not a good place to put it, by the way. And I'm going to open it, and there you go. Notice how their HTML file is about as beautiful as ours, right? Now I feel a little bit better about the stuff you were learning, right? Because the HTML is plain Jane, and no offense to Jane, right? But it's got all the words, it's got all the links, right? But it does not have any flair. There's zero flair to this. But if I throw in that CSS file, so this is linking to a CSS file, and here's the beauty of this also, you can also click on that link there, and you can see the language of CSS and all these special commands as I'm scrolling through them. And those commands take this and turn it into this or this. Now, mind you, this is the same exact page content as this HTML file. The difference is in that CSS file and what it's telling it to do, whether it's change the font or the position or the color or whatever. It can even add background images or whatever. Juan, you got a question?
Yeah, so does that automatically do that there, what you got on your screen now, if you key in, if you go back real quick, so like, I don't really know how to ask it. So, or to that, yeah. So if you, because how you viewed like a different source, right? You just kind of went in there and viewed.
Yeah, I took their web page.
Yeah.
I did a right click, view source.
And then
I
you went.
highlighted all the code and copied it,
Yeah.
but then I removed these two files, right? Because
Yeah.
otherwise I need those files too.
Okay.
Right.
Now, what was that second page you just went into, that second source? That one there. How'd you get to there?
All right. So I was in this source file.
Yep.
Right. And you notice the CSS file comes up as a link.
CSS. Yep. So you could click into that and view.
Yeah.
Now, Okay, now if you key in that CSS file, would it automatic, like say you're building a site, does it automatically do this stuff here? Or do you have to actually go in there and do it yourself?
Well, if I copied all this code and I had access to all the images, so I mean, in principle, I do because they have hard coded URLs here. I could replicate it
Yeah.
completely.
Okay.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting about the web, right? Whenever you see anything in your browser, in principle, you can right click view source and see all the stuff that puts it together. Whether or not you can access all the resources, that's a separate issue. Right. So, all right, let's go back to the example though, because I think this is where it gets really impressive. So what this author did is he's giving you this basic HTML file and he's giving you the CSS file that created it. You just download them right here. He's got links right to them. And then he put out this challenge. He said, hey, I know there's a lot of other talented web people out there. Here's my HTML file. Why don't you guys take it and put your CSS on it and show me what you got. So these links on the side are all the same HTML with different CSS. So I'm going to click through some of these. They're really cool, right? So here's one called Mid-Century Modern. Now check it out. Same content. Like, holy cow, what a different look, right? Looks really modern, kind of like weird layout. Stuff's all over the place. Stuff's grayed out. Some stuff's transparent, right? Pretty slick. What you think? Then how about this one? Check out this one. This one's got a static background that doesn't move. Titles are on the right. Navigation's on the left. All right, check out this one. This one's called Steel. I want you guys to notice as I move my mouse around, you guys noticing the animation here?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is pretty crazy. This is not done with JavaScript. In the old days, when we wanted to create effects like this, we'd have to do some really fancy JavaScript programming. Chances are you probably still wouldn't be able to pull it off, or you'd be turn into tools like Flash or something like that. But this is all done with straight up CSS. The animation, the moving text, the up and down. I mean, oh my God, what a cool look. Right? Talk about breaking the mold for a web page. And I'll be real frank, this is why I get enthused by it, because seeing what people come up with creatively. I mean, remember, it's still this. That's what's in the background, right? But they're turning it into like, oh my God, it's like a piece of art, really, you know? And you just keep going and going and going, man, you know? See if I can hit most of them. Oh, it's being redesigned. All right, never mind. There you go. And yes, I'm snacking right now. There's another weird one. More animation in that one. And these are all probably, you know, the creme de la creme of examples. I don't think they've changed them on this website for a while, but you know what? They're as impactful now as they were like 10 years ago when they first posted this. I mean, this really shows you, like, man, if I can go from this, right? Like, because you're learning your HTML, I'm like, this is what I'm learning. Oh, this is great, right? But then when it's like, hey, now I can create this, and then it's like, okay, game on, right? I mean, this energizes you when you see it because it looks so cool. But here's the deal, folks. It's baby steps, right? We don't go from point A to point B immediately, unfortunately. You can get there pretty quickly, but there's a little bit of studying you got to do and learning before you get there. But it is learnable, and if you have the wherewithal, you can actually pick this stuff up pretty darn quick. So once again, this principle comes from the print world, that, you know, we want to style things a certain way and make them look better, more appealing, keep readers' interests, you know, and just make it, you know, rather than just plain words on a page, really turn it into a piece of art. And CSS is the language. What is interesting about the approach of building CSS and what kind of makes it so powerful, if I'm building a website where I got like, let's say 5, 10, 20 pages, right? And, you know, even our primitive site, you know, for whatever it's worth, you know, and I'm going to just go back to this, and I got like 3 pages so far that I can click between that basically have no content. I'm still striving for this ideal that I want this to look consistent, right? Because if I'm building a website, I don't want like one page to look completely like something else. You know what I mean? I want that same design to carry from page to page. The point of the slide really that we were looking at here is that one of the powers of CSS is you can take all the pages that you have in your website, you can link all the pages to the same style sheet, and then I can change one line of code in my style sheet and basically change the look of all my web pages all at once by changing like one line of code.
Yeah, that was
Could
my
be.
question. That was actually kind of my question. I want that, like, I didn't ask you the correct way, but that's what I was
All
trying
right. Well, you know what?
to.
The answer comes even if it's delayed, right?
Yeah.
You know, and what I think is kind of neat about this. All right, you can kind of wrap your head around. Hey, I've got 10 pages and I can change them all at once. What if I have 10,000? Yep, you can change all 10,000 at once because all of them draw the same style. Now, talk about power, right? That's really, really powerful when you start to think about it like that. The other advantage to using this approach is that you have one centralized area where you're controlling your styles from. That's kind of the ideal. However, you know, as we're learning this, where we're going to start is we are going to start with learning how to style a tag directly inside of HTML, learning to style that from the top level, and then doing it from a separate file. All right, so these are kind of the things that the author says about it, and absolutely these are all true, right? So if you take all the style stuff out of your documents and put it in a style sheet, your web pages are smaller and your style control is much easier. You know, it really is a very logical way to work. There's 4 different ways to accomplish this, and a couple of them are kind of synonymous. So for example, inline will be when we put the tags directly or the styles directly inside of a tag. Embedded means that we're putting it at the top of an HTML document. That used to be kind of the old way to do it. The modern way to do it is we put it in an external file, all my HTML links to it. And another way you can do it is you can import a different style sheet so you can call it in. So I can import one style sheet into another. That gets a little bit deeper, right? And that would, I'd say that's a pretty advanced skill, and you have to have a fairly complicated website to be doing that one generally. All right, let's start with these, you know, kind of reiterating what I just said. Inline means that we add it directly to a tag, just like we add like href or an ID or a class, same kind of thing. Embedded goes up in the head section of the document, the non-visible part of the page, right? You put those styles up there. The external, we just make a separate file. We give it a new extension, .css. We link our HTML to it, tell it it's a style sheet, and it loads it up automatically. That's the preferred way. And then finally, the imported, which is similar to external, but usually the use of this one is you have one style sheet that already exists and you're importing one into it. That's the approach. Okay, so CSS operates using a completely different language now. So this is one of the problems of teaching this class, because we're not really teaching just one language, we're teaching 2 at the same time. We kind of have seen HTML with its brackets and its tags, and we're maybe even getting comfortable with that, and that will continue as we're doing our work. But when we move to CSS, they're looking at stuff in a different way, and basically they're looking at it as a declaration of a style, and then what you're applying a style to is called the selector. right? And then you put in a set of curly brackets followed by the property that you're trying to affect. In this case, I'm trying to affect the color. Then I put in a colon, and what do I want that color to be? So the property and the value. The thing that is the selector is what we are applying that style to. So this is a pretty basic one, but pretty normal. Here they're starting to get into a couple of examples, and you know what, we're going to try these. All right, so this is where it kind of gets fun, right? So in this case, they're going to start applying a style to the body tag, and really kind of the grand point of this is colors can be expressed in a couple of different ways, and actually more than a couple of different ways. There's actually probably half a dozen ways now. But in the old days, when I first learned how to do this, we would have to learn what we call hex code. All right, now we got to talk about what hex code is. So hex code, all right. So if you guys are comfortable doing like regular numbers like 0 through 9, right? Like, you know, and then that's called the base 10 number system. Hexadecimal is the base 16 number system, and it works really well with computer memory algorithms and stuff because it's a power of 2. 16 is what, 2 to the 4th power is a 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. I think so. I think that's correct. And so the numbers, you know, we use the numbers 0 through 9 for hexadecimal, but then when we get past 9 and we have 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, it goes up to 15, we switch to letters. So 10 is A, B is 11, C is 12, D is 13, E is 14, and F is 15, or the biggest digit, right? And then they take these and they break them down into these pairs. And I will talk about this more, by the way, but the first 2 digits are for red, the second 2 digits are for green, and the third 2 digits are for blue. And notice these are all set to 0, and the blue value is set to 1515, which also in hexadecimal means 256 or 255 actually, meaning the blue is cranked all the way on and the red and the green are turned off. So what color do you get? You get blue, right? So this is how we had to do it in the old days, and we have all these charts. So you'd find the color you want, and it had a code next to it, and I have to type in the hex code.
It still shows on that. Like I seen it before. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, now if you work in graphics or video or any
Yep.
stuff like that, that's usually how they still declare colors,
Okay.
is using hex codes, because it's one of the more accurate ways to do it. Later on, they came up with several different systems, including basic color names. I think that they now have a 256 color name library. It might even be more than that now, where you can call a color by name and it just appears. Like it's a black, blue, yellow, red, green, magenta, you know, beige, you know, etc. And you can just call it out by name and it works. It's not really considered very accurate, but you can do it that way. Hex codes are more accurate because I can make variances on these numbers. Like I might not want a really strong blue. I might want to tone it down a little bit, and I might want to throw a little red in there, move it towards purple, etc. You know, and that's like where, you know, the artistic license come in. But this is the syntax that we basically use. So we can declare colors like this, or we can declare colors like this. All right, we'll get into like actually trying this now. So we're going to experiment a little bit in a couple of different ways. So we're going to, you know, kind of deviate from this PowerPoint for a bit and start writing some code so we get some bang for our buck, basically. Now I am going to delete the sample file from these people, and I think I can just hit my delete key here if I'm not mistaken. There we go. Let's move to recycle bin. All right, so I'm going to start by styling my homepage because that's where I have the most content. So I think it'll be most impactful. And the one thing that they're not showing us yet, right, is the 2 different ways we can style things. So I'm going to kind of demonstrate both kind of here. I'm going to start by doing inline styles, and then I'm going to move over to embedded styles. So with inline styles, that means we're putting it in line with the HTML. So I'm gonna like go into my body tag here, add a space. I'm gonna add a style attribute equals double quotes. And then I'm gonna do something really goofy. I'm gonna say color. And notice Visual Studio Code's kind of cool this way, right? They give me the list of colors so I can like choose them out from the list. But I'm going to type this in on purpose, right? So I'm going to choose blue. And then they don't tell you this yet, but whenever you terminate a style statement, you really should put in a semicolon. And this is called an inline style, by the way. So I'm going to Control S to save. And what's fascinating about this style, and this is, like being the first one I'm going to show you. So I'm going to hit the home page here and watch what happens to the home page. Is that what you expected?
No.
Yeah, not at all. What did you expect? You wanted the background, right?
Background, yeah.
Yeah. So this is really weird. I don't know why they chose to do it like this, but when you just say color, what that's referring to is the color of the font. And I wish it would just be font color or something like that, but that's not how they do it. Color refers to the color of the font. If I want to change the background, I can say background dash color, put in a colon, and then choose a color. And let's try something hideous that hurts our eyes, like coral. Right? I'm just picking it off the list here in Visual Studio Code. I am telling you up front, these are not good color choices together. I know it, right? Control S to save, back to the browser. Oops, missed it. Let's try that again. Let's do a refresh. Woo!
It's beautiful.
Yeah. You must be a Chicago Bears fan, right? But holy cow. I mean, this is also a really good example of like, okay, this hurts my eyes. Yeah, it does. The orange hurts.
I think mine might be worse.
Yeah, the blue hurts. And maybe the way it's coming through Zoom isn't like what you guys are seeing, but yeah, it's not all colors work well together, by the way. Right. It's not the point. So we're getting the screenshot here.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll.
Yeah, it's not focusing, unfortunately.
I could just.
Oh well. I could have you share your screen, but you know what? I can only imagine the beautiful thing you created.
Oh yeah, no, it's a yellow background with a light blue text.
All right. Let's get a little more practical with this. And we're not really digging into this part of the chapter yet, but Visual Studio Code has some nice tools built in. So if you're using a manual editor, you might not have a color palette like this. But if you hover over the little color palettes that they have inside the code, you can come in here and you can get a little more particular, right? So a really bright blue might not be a good choice, but you know what? A dark blue, that's pretty slick, right? So I'm going to choose a darker blue. I'm going to do the same thing for the background. I think that orange is too strong, but if I brought it down to here, right, I want you to notice it switched to a different format. We'll talk about this later. Just go with it is what I'm going to tell you for right now. So I'm doing Control S to save, back over to the browser and look at the difference. Still, the text is still blue. The background is still orange. They're just softer. See how much more pleasing that is? And I'm not saying it even looks good. I'm just saying, right? So this here is an example. I'm going to go back to my original blue. And what did we put in here? Coral. Right, there we go. Right. This is an example of inline styles. Now, I will tell you that there are times where this is useful, but generally speaking, when you're writing HTML code, this is generally to be avoided. Right? Because what if I wanted to do this to all my pages and I have 10,000 of them? Do you want to go open every HTML file and add the same code? Right. Yeah, makes zero sense. All right. So that's an example of an inline style. Dramatic, but I am blowing it away because it's horrible. Right. What might be more practical, and I'm just kind of going to find a spot here, is I might find like, hey, how about this weird paragraph I did with the ampersands and stuff? And what if I just do that here? What if I say style equals color? Let's just do something simple like red. Okay. And I'm going to save it. And I want you to notice on this one, there's no semicolon at the end. Right? Because there's no other style that follows. But normally I still tell everybody you should put that in. Control S to save. Back over to the browser, doing a refresh. And then you can see just that one thing is affected by an inline style. Okay. Let's move to the other approach really quick, which is to kind of do what they were doing, and they were putting it inside of style tags. And style tags are ones that we add up here to the head section of the document. So I'm just going to go ahead and add style. See if I can even type it. Open and close it, and then spread them apart a little bit because we're going to put some stuff in here. But key thing, it is in the head section of the document. It's not on the visible part of the page, right? And so when I come in here and I'm in between these style tags, now I'm no longer using HTML syntax. I am using CSS syntax. So if I want to apply a style to the whole body, I type in the selector. I just use the same exact name as the tag. Right, so it's selecting the body for the style. I put in a set of curly brackets and then I press enter. Right, and this is kind of considered the standard format. Selector, curly bracket, you put your stuff here indented, and then another curly bracket. Then you start declaring your styles. I'm going to declare color, and I'm going to choose a color name here. I'm going to choose something kind of dark. Let's see if I can find something kind of dark. Not finding anything. All right. Thanks, Google. All right. How about midnight blue? Sounds pretty good. Midnight blue. Semicolon. Right. Press enter, new line. Now I'm going to do background color. And I can pick another color. So if I have a midnight blue text, the really dark blue text, maybe beige or bisque. Let's go with bisque. Would be a good background color. And now I'm going to save it. Right, back over to the browser. Let's see if it did anything. And there you go. So, it's bisque with a dark blue font. Notice this, where I'm actually putting in conflicting styles here. So let's talk about that for a second. So here I have this text that's red, but I just went and told the page, hey, the color of your text should be midnight blue. Why is this still red? So the answer to that is because when you add a style in line with the tag, that supersedes it in the cascade. So the cascade is basically inline tags supersede tags at the top of the page, and tags at the top of the page supersede styles that are in an external file. All right, so we'll learn about that too. Now, if I wanted the same effect on all my pages, I'm still in the situation where I have to copy this and copy it onto each page. Not really a great idea. I think you guys would agree, right? All right, so we will move to linking to an external file, but for right now, we're going to go back to our PowerPoint and kind of move forward on the content. There's all sorts of stuff that we can do, and it's not just the color of the text and the background color, as you guys can imagine, right? I mean, there's so much stuff that we can do. It kind of gets a little bit overwhelming. What I would like to do right now is I would like to take a really brief little break. And I'm going to pause the recording. All right. So as we're working through this particular chapter, by the way, we're going to be playing with most of the stuff that you see on the screen here in one way, shape, form, or another, and experiment with them. And then what will happen is every week as we kind of move forward, you will keep learning new techniques. What I will tell you is as you work through this book and this course, you're not going to walk away having used every HTML tag and every CSS style. It's almost impossible actually to do all of that, right? But you can try. And usually there's ones that you use a lot and ones that you use seldomly or ones you use for very specific purposes. And the really higher end complicated ones like animations and stuff, for example, are ones that take a little bit of work and practice and understanding of the mathematics behind it to make it work, right? So like it's a building process to get there. But we are going to play with most of these during this chapter 3 stuff. But when we start to work with colors on the screen, and that's a lot of what we play with initially, we have to understand that the screen displays color to us in kind of a really weird way. When a screen is actually projecting light into our eyes, it does so by mixing together red, green, and blue. And if I take red, green, and blue, if I had like 3 lights really close together that were pure red, pure green, and pure blue, and I shone them all at full brightness, from a distance, it looks like white, like the background of this PowerPoint. And if I could zoom in far enough on the pixels on my screen to look at one, that's exactly what's going on. There's a red, green, blue emitters in each pixel that are all turned up all the way to full to get that white on the screen. If I turn them all off, I get black. If I turn them all on, I get white. If I leave them all at the same level and turn them down a little bit, I get gray. If I, just boost the red, turn off the others, I get red, etc. Right? And then if I start mixing the values, so it's not like just one color or another, then I can get every color in between. Oh my God, you can get like just about any color you can imagine. Right? So this is where it gets kind of interesting. What's fascinating is RGB values basically are set by mixing the numbers between 0 and 255 for 256 possible values. And I talked about this before, right? The hex numbers are in base 16 and they go from 0 to F instead of from 0 to 9. And that's just kind of the old school way to do it. It's not the way that I actually prefer to do it now, but hex codes are still pretty universal, both in graphics programs and anything where you're working with a screen. RGB is how it's produced, right? And so hex codes work with RGB. They do break down into pairs, right? The first 2 digits are red, green, and blue. If they're all turned down, it's black. If they're all set to F, it's white. If it's something mixed in between, it's something mixed in between, right? And there's actually charts, some old HTML books used to have like pages at the back, like with all the hex codes so you could figure out which color you want, and it's kind of ridiculous because now what we functionally do, by the way, most of us that work in the field just go on the web and we just type, color picker, and there's one in Google. You just slide the slider, move your thing around, and there's your hex code. How you like that? Right. And the other 5 formats or whatever are present. And so once you can just come here, find the color you want, copy and paste it into your code. And you can get a very particular color. Right. When people do branding for companies, right? And just for example, if I bring up if I look at like a Coca-Cola can, it's not just any old red, it's Coca-Cola red. You know what I mean? Or if I'm like, looking at like I don't know, a Walmart, right? They have a Walmart blue that they use. Walmart blue and yellow, right? And I'm sure they have very particular color codes they're using. So I think that's pretty fascinating in and of itself, that, you know, you can break it down. In the past, and it's more of an issue in the past, we used to have a specific web color palette, which is actually a reduced color palette that allowed us to display colors at least kind of similarly on a Mac and a PC. And to this day, what you're generally going to find is if you're working on a Mac, the colors are accurate. If you're working on a PC, it depends on the quality of your monitor, the quality of your graphics card, and the settings of all of those things working together. A good PC will have an accurate screen, but it is possible, especially when you're in the green and blue ranges of color, that if you pull it up on a Mac and you set a PC, like a cheap PC next to it, the colors won't even be close in that range. It's really bizarre. And that was kind of an attempt to kind of work around it. That still can happen though, and it has nothing to do with the code. It has everything to do with the hardware, right? And usually it's indicative that you're using low quality hardware if the colors don't match, by the way. That's why a lot of graphic design work, folks, is done on Macintosh, because the monitors are color true, much more so than a PC. Right out of the box, you don't have to configure them. They just are. On a PC, and anybody that's got a good graphics card knows this, that you can go in and you can tweak settings, right, to make it like right. And then, you know, then if you get really geeky about it, you can even, like, there's like forums that are like, hey, if you have this monitor and this graphics card, these are the settings, you know, people have figured it out, you know. So if you have a color accurate monitor, it's calibrated right on the Windows side and it's high quality, you can get accurate color, but it's not guaranteed. You're working on a Mac, generally the colors are true, unfortunately. Sorry, PC people. Right? There are a bunch of places where you can talk about, you know, the importance of colors going on a web page. I really don't want to delve into this conversation too much, but it is a concern when you're putting websites together, because some people cannot differentiate certain colors. For example, if I put the word warning on the screen and I want it to be red, man, there's certain people that are colorblind, they can't see that, right? A lot of men also, as they get older, tend to have difficulties with colors, especially in the blue, green, purple kind of range. They can't really see the difference. They don't even know that they can't see the difference. That's even weirder, right? So you know your audience, but accessibility is important. You cannot assume that everybody can see what you're seeing and that they're seeing is accurate. You just can't bank on that. All right. All right, we're at the point now where we're going to do a little demonstration. We have already done the inline demonstration, but I think this is a great point to stop for the week. We'll revisit stuff we kind of already did, and then we'll pick up and finish the rest of chapter 3 next week. So this video ends here.